This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Doctors in Senegal say surging COVID cases are causing a panic in hospitals. Africa's most anticipated athletic events begin in Tokyo in a few hours amid COVID concerns. Developing countries look forward to $5 billion in education funding following the global summit in London. Hello and a very warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. And with me is Uche Okoronkwo with a preview of your business news.
Thank you, Lindy. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Bits. Tunisia's president accuses businessmen of stealing billions of funds. And Egypt launches a $6.5 billion property initiative for its low and middle income citizens. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, back to you, Lindy.
Thanks, Uche. In our top story, it's just a matter of hours before millions of Africans are expected to be glued to their TV screens as athletic events begin in Tokyo. The track, field and road events begin Friday against a backdrop of COVID-19 concerns. Japan is once again reporting its highest daily COVID-19 cases on record since the beginning of the pandemic. Here's John Matthews with more.
Well, more than 3,800 new COVID-19 cases were reported in Tokyo on Thursday, with over 10,000 reported nationwide. And official numbers only show around 500 ongoing severe cases, but hospitals say that number only counts those who are near death and that patient beds are beginning to fill up. Neighboring prefectures to Tokyo are also seeing record high caseloads. Their governors are set to call for a new state of emergency in their areas. The Japanese Medical Association has also suggested this be made a nationwide declaration, but there's no sign yet this will impact the ongoing Olympic Games. Organizers say the competitions are not connected to the uptick, while domestic commentators say the Games are encouraging people to ignore government requests to stay indoors. Now, over to the Games, it is a tight three-country race for golds. China and Japan are tied at 15, with the U.S. just behind at 14. Now, China grabbed 3 golds in Thursday's competitions. That's including a world record time from the 4x200 women's freestyle relay team, fending off the U.S. squad led by favorite Katie Ledecky, plus another heartbreak today for Team Japan in tennis. Domestic legend Kei Nishikori was knocked out of the men's singles, taken 2 straight sets by Serbia's Novak Djokovic, the world number 1. He is well on his way to becoming the first man to take home what's called a Golden Slam. That's 4 Grand Slam titles and an Olympic gold in the same year. But with Nishikori gone, that's 2 of Japan's greatest hopes off the courts. Naomi Osaka, arguably the face of Japanese sport, was knocked out in the 3rd round of the women's singles tournament. John Matthews, CGTN, Tokyo.
Right, well, in other coronavirus news, let's go to Senegal now, where the health ministry has vowed to ramp up vaccination efforts as the country battles a wave of infections sweeping its capital, Dakar. The West African country this week received jabs from China's Sinopharm and Johnson & Johnson.
Senegal remains vulnerable to the COVID-19 pandemic due to low vaccination rates. The ongoing record surge of infections in the country has left the capital, Dakar, without spare hospital beds for severe cases as more people raise alarm over the looming crisis.
In one day alone, average, usually we bury about 3-4 people. Yesterday alone, they buried 35 people. So there is something going on. This is the world crisis. I'm sorry that my people here, they kind of figured it out a little bit too late. I wish they would have figured it out a little bit sooner. But now we're just trying to catch up.
A third wave of infections has seen Senegal record a quarter of its total cases in July alone. Health services have been stretched thin, with workers now fighting to keep medical centers afloat.
We've never seen this. We've never seen patients, especially young ones, arriving in respiratory distress. We have had serious cases, we have had deaths during the first 2 waves, but the number of deaths and serious cases that we have now, we've never had before. This third wave, to be honest, this third wave threatens to drown us.
Health personnel are also warning that the numbers of cases and deaths in the country are likely to be much higher than official figures.
The situation now is much more severe. What we're seeing is just the tip of the iceberg. If, for example, we declare 1,000 positive tests, 50 of them serious, you can be sure that there are 1,500 positive cases in reality, because there are a lot of people who have COVID and won't go to the hospital, or they will just do a rapid test that will come back positive and they will go and treat themselves.
While some hospitals are not reporting shortages in oxygen, demand is so high that deliveries are being done round the clock. In Dakar, the current epicenter of the pandemic in Senegal, every bed with supplemental oxygen for patients in severe respiratory distress is taken. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
Well, parts of the United Kingdom are opening up to people from the United States and much of Europe. Fully vaccinated travelers will be able to enter England and Scotland without quarantining. Here's more from CGTN's Nicole Johnson.
So what it effectively means is that if you're in Europe or the United States and you want to travel to England, at this stage it only applies to England, from Monday you'll be able to enter with no quarantine required. Now up until then it's been a 10-day quarantine, which has basically really put a dent in international travel and tourism. It's made it practically impossible. You will still have to have a PCR test on day 2 and another test before you arrive in the country. So still some restrictions there, but great news for the international tourism and travel industry, and also for the more than 5 million Europeans who live here in the UK. They'll be able to reunite with their families and have visitors. So that's the announcement this far. And for Europe, at least, it should be relatively straightforward, because for those double vaccinated people, they have a digital COVID passport. It's well established. So for them, entering the UK is something that shouldn't be too difficult in terms of smoothing out the process. So far, it's only going to be one-way travel, and that's because the United States has had an executive order banning the UK citizens from entering the US. It's had that since the beginning of the pandemic, and now under the Biden administration, despite talks going on between both countries, it seems that that won't be lifted anytime soon. Obviously, for this very lucrative route between the UK and the US, the travel industry and the British government is desperate to get it happening again.
Well, staying in the UK, Prime Minister Boris Johnson and Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta have been hosting a fundraising summit in London on Thursday, focused on global education efforts. The aim of the summit is to raise up to $5 billion. The funds will be used to educate children across the developing world over the next 5 years. The Global Education Summit has been attended by other world leaders, business, charity, education and youth representatives. Well, let's go live now to London for the latest on this. We're joined by our correspondent, Nicole Johnston. Nicole, of course, some very encouraging prospects for education in the developing world. Tell us, what is the latest from the Education Summit?
Well, as you said, they set an ambitious target, $5 billion, but we've just heard that they haven't reached that target. It's around $4 billion. Now, of course, the Global Summit and the British government will be saying that that's not a failure. From their perspective, they'll be trying to raise those extra funds over the next 5 years. So they wanted $5 billion over 5 years. That would have allowed another 175 million children to go to school in some 90 low-income countries. But a lot of this summit has really focused on the impact of the global pandemic on not only education, but on girls' education specifically. We just heard from British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. He was his usual optimistic self. He said that the global summit could be a silver bullet, in fact, that could solve all of humanity's problems. We also heard from Kenya's President, Uhuru Kenyatta. He focused on the education of girls and emphasised the role that teachers have played during the pandemic. He said that they had been silent heroes. But as I said, the pandemic has had a lot of the focus. Half the world's children have been out of school. They talked about that. And the fact that many of them won't return. At the peak of the pandemic, 1.66 billion children were at home. 24 million, they believe, could still be at home, and many of those are unlikely to return. And that's really the great concern here, how to get those students back into school.
Certainly this education summit has come at the very perfect time. Thank you so much, Nicole Johnson, joining us there live from London. Now, China's new ambassador to the United States has taken up his post in Washington, D.C. In a press conference, Qin Gang said China and the U.S. are trying to find a way forward, despite differences in many areas. He also said the two sides face many challenges ahead, but also great opportunities. Qin is the 11th Chinese ambassador to the U.S. and previously served as vice foreign minister in China for 3 years. Yun Yu has more from Washington.
China's ambassador to the United States, Qin Gang, spoke to the press at the very same day of his arrival. And during his speech, he mentioned that 50 years ago, when Dr. Henry Kissinger visited China, he had to do it through a third country and also secretly. But today, that the gate for China-U.S. relation has been opened and it's impossible to close. And he says that this is the trend of the times, and this is what people want. But he also mentions that right now the world is undergoing unprecedented changes for over a century. And China and the United States, these two countries with very different cultural background, historic background, and societal systems need to find new ways to coexist under these new circumstances. And Qin Gang said that he will carry on the spirit between the communication between the two leaders earlier this year, and to function as a bridge for multilateral, for the bilateral cooperations and dialogue. And also, as the U.S. is now seeing new COVID cases rise, he also wishes all the best for the American people and an early victory against COVID-19 pandemic. CGTN America, Washington, D.C.
Now, Qin had a long career in diplomacy before becoming ambassador to the U.S., serving for years as a spokesperson for the foreign ministry.
Born in Tianjin in 1966, Qin Gang began his career at Beijing Service Bureau for Diplomatic Missions in 1988. He later moved into the Chinese Foreign Ministry, where he specialized in European affairs between 1992 and 2002. He was Foreign Ministry spokesperson for 2 terms between 2005 and 2014. Qin accompanied President Xi Jinping on numerous overseas trips while he worked at the Protocol Department of the Foreign Ministry. He became China's Vice Foreign Minister in 2018, mainly in charge of protocol and news. He has always been very firm in defending China's interests and has regularly criticized countries that use baseless claims against China.
Well, time now for a short break. Still ahead on Africa Live. Coming up, Ugandan businesses and schools take a hit as price hikes in internet data begin to bite. And the return of Africa's stolen artifacts sparks debate in Nigeria ahead of the arrival of the famous Benin bronzes.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Let's start in Uganda now, where a 12% government hike on the cost of internet data is beginning to bite. Leon Senyange reports on how businesses, individuals and schools are all feeling the pinch.
And then it says in the West.
Janet Omita, like teachers all over the world, has been forced to take up online teaching during the pandemic. But for teachers here in Uganda, there is a steep price to pay.
You need to have the gadgets that it takes to learn, to teach children online. You have to buy computers, laptops in an institution, train the teachers on how to go about with this. That alone is quite expensive.
Through message.
And it just got more costly. A 12% government increase on internet data this financial year is already having an impact on schools.
Our budget has actually gone high, but this is an initiative that we started. It's something, especially after the lockdown. After this lockdown, we have no opportunity that kids can learn. We just have to keep moving, but with a lot of difficulties.
More expensive internet is also hurting parents and pupils. This elementary school runs about 18 online lessons a day. The teachers say not all the pupils that enrolled for the lessons attend all the time. Kasim Khalifa is one of the lucky few to be studying online. His mother says it is taking a huge chunk out of her finances as she now has to pay more for data bundles.
I have 3 kids. They all have to be on online lessons. I find you have to sacrifice only one. I assume now senior 1 is also there. Senior 2 is there. It's something painful for really.
With over 12 million internet users in the country, experts warn that rising internet costs will not only affect the educational sector, but the economy as well.
The data tax doesn't make sense. Government needs money, yes, but there are a lot of avenues through which you can expand the tax base.
There is uncertainty over how soon schools will reopen. That means online learning will likely continue. And while that could keep teachers like Ometa busier, parents like Mariam still have to worry about how much more they have to part for data. Leon Senyange, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Over the past week, Egypt and Belgium have been discussing how to combat the smuggling of antiquities. The issue has also sparked debate in Nigeria, which is expecting the return of over 1,000 stolen artifacts next year, including the famous Benin bronzes. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmus with more.
The artifacts were stolen when British forces conducted an expedition in 1897 on the Benin Kingdom, in what is today Edo State in southern Nigeria. A substantial number of the artifacts were sold to museums in Germany. After years of pressure and negotiation, Germany has decided to return the artifacts.
We also agreed to have a definite timeline for the repatriation of the artifacts because Nigeria is tired of an indefinite timeline. Thereafter, it was resolved that the agreement on the repatriation should be signed latest by December this year, and that the repatriation should be concluded by August 2022.
There are questions as to whether Nigeria has the museum standard and manpower required to keep and maintain the artifacts. This prominent Nigerian art collector thinks the country does not.
We need to interrogate ourselves and find out what we can do to prepare to receive the works. For instance, we don't have thermolucence dating machines in Nigeria. We don't have carbon dating machines in Nigeria. And then when people bring works to Nigeria and they tell us this work is 5 million years, we believe them.
The government says it has the capacity to receive and store the works, and that the museum is already in the works as part of the agreement for the return of the artifacts.
We had the local technology to preserve. But this is without, prejudice to the fact that the government is working in partnership with many organizations to provide museum infrastructure.
So we have our curators, our documentation officers, our exhibition officers, our archaeologists, our ethnographers. All these technical teams are there to identify any artifacts.
Most of the artifacts being returned are the famous Benin bronzes. Apart from their cultural and religious significance, they are a huge draw for tourists.
These artifacts are so cherished all over the world, and we realize that if they are returned to Nigeria and properly exhibited, within and outside the country, under our control. They stand to increase the influx of tourists to our nation and also earn us good money.
Nigeria has already taken delivery of a number of its stolen artifacts from other countries and sources, but the ones being inspected from Germany will be the largest numbers so far. There is a raging debate in the country over who should be in custody of the artifacts when they're eventually returned, but the central government has made it clear it will be responsible for them. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
The United Nations World Food Programme has listed Egypt as one of 23 countries that face food insecurity. According to the UN report, hunger in the Arab region continues to rise, threatening efforts to achieve the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, including the Zero Hunger goal. From Cairo, Yasser Hakim reports on some of the measures Egypt's government is taking to tackle the crisis.
The concept of food security came to the fore at the peak of the COVID-19-induced disruptions, which affected global supply chains and left millions across the world facing food shortages. And now a new report by the United Nations warns that more than 51 million people in the Arab region risk facing hunger as the pandemic disrupts farming activities.
A state that doesn't achieve food security faces an increase in hunger, poverty and severe implications. Without these food and agricultural production projects, you also have less employment opportunities and therefore higher social complications. The UN statistics show there are 700 million people suffering from hunger and poverty worldwide because of the lack of food security. That's about 8.9% of the population. After the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic, it could reach 18%. These are scary numbers that threaten world economies.
The UN World Food Programme has warned that close to 24 countries, including Egypt, face the threat of lack of food security. Egypt has been facing a deficit in strategic commodities such as wheat. Aware of these risks, the government has launched mega agricultural focused projects to improve the local food supply.
The Ministry of Agriculture is embarking on a number of efforts to achieve food security. This plan doesn't depend on one ministry, but all the government is working together as one unit to achieve those goals. We are expanding the cultivated areas. We have the new Delta Agricultural Project. We have the 1.5 million Fedans project. And we also have the construction and development projects in Sinai and in the South Valley.
The government's approach in boosting food production has been welcomed by experts.
Egypt is on the right track when it comes to agricultural investments. Unlike in the past, the cultivated land now is close to factories and ports, so they link together to create a full agricultural production cycle and also increase exports. Agricultural production has reached 17% of the GDP. The state is keen on introducing modern irrigation systems to conserve water, and that has enabled us to save 15 to 20% of cultivation cost for every fedan or acre.
But there are challenges that have limited its potential, including water scarcity, dispersed pieces of cultivated land, and a fast-growing population. The government has in the meantime outlined a medium and long-term plan to counter these challenges.
We lack adequate water resources, so we are establishing several water desalination and water recycling projects to have enough water supply to irrigate the new cultivated areas. We also are implementing the vertical expansion projects where we work on increasing production from the same land area. That's what we are implementing by introducing new types of seeds that adapt to the local climate and water scarcity to guarantee more agricultural production from the same plot of land. So our strategy is based on horizontal and vertical aspects.
Officials say the country is on track to becoming food secure. Ultimately, the North African state hopes it will in future be less dependable on imports, become self-sufficient in strategic commodities, and achieve a high level of food security. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Meanwhile, in Somalia, herders are facing an uncertain future affected by climate change and conflict that has left communities fighting to survive. CGTN's Daniel Arab Moy reports.
Herders in Somalia are facing multiple crises. Unpredictable weather patterns, droughts and floods have taken a toll on pastoralists, threatening their only livelihoods, their livestock. Conflict, the COVID-19 pandemic and recent locust invasions have compounded the effects of an already dire situation.
We lost 50 animals. There were 70. 50 died and we were left with 20 camels. Some no longer have livestock. They lost them all. That's how it is, and we are surviving.
Only God knows, but we wonder whether our way of life is in danger. If the droughts continue and the animals get fewer, then this way of life is in real danger. That is our fear.
Herds are dwindling as pasture for the animals become harder to find.
Somalia is located in East Africa, the Horn of Africa, that is known to be, in terms of global warming, 2.5 times faster than the rest of the world. This has brought extreme weather events. These extreme weather events, due to global warming, climate change, are droughts, floods, cyclones.
Recovery for the communities is becoming more difficult to envision.
The climate change combination has been worsened by an exceptional situation of coronavirus. When coronavirus came, the first consequence was the closure of the borders. And Somalia depends a lot in terms of import of goods, but also exporting livestock to the Arab.
According to the United Nations, climate-related hazards in Somalia have increased threefold in the past decades. Conflict has led to the internal displacement of some 2.9 million people. The lives of many Somalis depend on humanitarian efforts to support them while they try to rebuild what has been lost. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN.
You're watching Africa Live, your business news now with Uche.
Thanks, Lindy. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Tunisia's president accuses businessmen of stealing billions of funds. And Egypt launches a $6.5 billion property initiative for its low and middle income citizens.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN. Well, let's start off in Tunisia, where President Kais Saied has accused businessmen there of stealing billions in state funds. Saied says he is addressing the country's dire economic situation and curbing widespread corruption. Here's CGTN's Adnan Shaushi reporting.
Kais Saied has alleged that more than 460 businessmen stole over 13.5 billion Tunisian dinars, some $4.8 billion of public money. The president has offered the accused an alternative solution to serving jail time.
I propose a penal reconciliation with businessmen involved in looting the people's money and tax evasion in exchange for their commitment to projects, instead of being prosecuted and imprisoned. I have no intention to harm or abuse the owners of SMEs and all business people. This is the Tunisian people's money, and it should return to the people.
The head of state also urged traders to reduce prices and warned them not to hoard goods or speculate. Kais Saied said violators would be prosecuted.
I ask all wholesalers and merchants in charge of the distribution of food products, as well as retailers, to be patriotic and not to take advantage of the current difficult situation in the country for profit and monopoly.
The Central Bank of Tunisia expects an average inflation rate of 5.3% in 2021, 5.6% in 2022, and 5.1% in 2023. Many Tunisians say the president's decisions are popular among the middle and the lower classes.
The economic situation is difficult, while many corrupt businessmen and merchants are taking advantage. We support the president's decisions. Those who stole our money must be held accountable.
The dire economic and social situation led to mass protests across Tunisia. The president said that strong economic choices had caused major financial problems in the country. During his meetings with the president of the Confederation of Industry, Trade and Handicrafts, which represents some 150,000 companies, the head of state announced a crackdown on corruption. Kais Saied campaigned against corruption before his election in 2019. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
And meanwhile, Egypt has launched a $6.5 billion mortgage finance initiative. It will help low and middle income citizens to own property at subsidized prices, with, of course, long-term loan repayment agreements. Here's Yasser Hakim with the details.
For most Egyptians, owning a home is viewed as one of the keys to a successful career. Many have, however, been unable to afford the high cost of housing units, and especially now due to the economic fallout caused by the coronavirus pandemic. That's why the central bank is financing real estate loans for low and medium income earners.
Real estate financing has always been minimal because of its complications, but the latest 100 billion Egyptian pounds initiative that will be offered at reduced 3% interest rates and repayment plan for up to 30 years is unprecedented in Egypt's history. There is a large segment that has relied on renting, but which will now be able to buy and own an apartment because of this initiative.
The initiative is aimed at helping the middle and low-income segments, who are the majority of the population, to own a fully finished apartment of their choice in any location they want.
The initiative has no faults. For us youth, most of us want to get married and find a place to live in. This initiative will finally allow us to own a place close to work, with long-term 30 years payment plan and very low interest without any financial load.
This will encourage everyone to go ahead and buy an apartment. My son will now be able to own an apartment because he will pay over a 30-year period. Very comfortable.
Experts believe the mortgage scheme would also help stimulate the real estate market that has only been flourishing for the country's high-class segment.
I expect this initiative will significantly affect the overall real estate market. Yes, the market has been quickly recovering from the coronavirus fallout, and sales are picking up, especially in the new capital and new cities like North Coast, Zayed and New October. But competition between developers now is not only on quality but also on facilitating financing and providing easier payment options to attract a wider segment of the society as well as more clients.
Besides the mortgage scheme, the Egyptian government has been building and providing thousands of housing developments at subsidized prices for the youth and relocating the poor from shanty towns into modern real estate compounds. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
And in Uganda, authorities want all cars, motorcycles and water vessels fitted with digital trackers for security reasons. But motorists there have challenged the plan, saying it violates the right to privacy. Here's CGTN's Michael Baileke with that report.
Anthony Walusimbi runs a vehicle tracking company. Most of his customers fix GPS trackers to protect their cars from theft, and for some companies to track the real-time location of their fleet.
The usefulness of these technologies is to simplify our lives, to make our lives better in all aspects. For example, if we look at GPS telematics, we are looking at your asset security. Take, for example, you install this device in your vehicle. The peace of mind you get when you know at any one moment I'm able to locate my asset at wherever it is on the globe.
Ugandan authorities now want every vehicle and motorcycle on its roads tracked. Trackers will also be installed on all water vessels. A Russian company has been contracted for 10 years to fix the devices. The government says this will help check criminal activity on the move.
We shall be able to know where any motor vehicle is at any particular time. This is going to help in the investigation to bring the culprit to book.
The mandatory security tracking plan was initiated by Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni to end sporadic gun crime in the country. The government says motorists will meet the cost of installation of the tracking devices, but many are more worried about the GPS trackers that they believe will compromise personal security and interfere with their privacy. The tracking devices will be linked to the country's CCTV system and controlled by centralized traffic monitoring technology. But some people insist the intensified surveillance would infringe on their freedom.
This technology can be entirely abused, and this entirely depends on who has access to this data. Because if you may ask me, as a telematics player for so long, the kind of policies and non-disclosures that we sign with our customers are something that we take seriously, because we are dealing with sensitive data.
Uganda has previously experienced a string of assassinations of prominent politicians, Muslim clerics, and security officials. Most of the murders remain unsolved. The government believes installing tracking devices will help security monitor all movements and quickly respond in case of an incident. But many law-abiding citizens are worried about their right to privacy. Mike Kobaleke, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Well, let's head to South Africa now. Mango Airlines has been temporarily suspended. The low-cost airline failed to honor its debt with air traffic navigation services in the country. Now, this is the second time this airline has been grounded because of debt. Here's CGTN Sumitra Naidu with more on that report.
Travelers were caught off guard when Mango made the announcement Tuesday afternoon. The airline has agreed to compensate passengers with vouchers for future flights, but was unable to give any guarantees on when it would start flying again.
What is happening is we've reached a stalemate with our creditors, and one of them is ATNS. And then ATNS, they do our air traffic navigation solution. So we owe them money. So as a result, we had our discussions, and what transpired is they decided that we cannot fly because we owe them. And this is where we are.
Mango Airlines, a subsidiary of SAA, has been waiting for government disbursements since last year. But there's been ongoing delays, which has left the airline in a mountain of debt.
Part of the issue is it had to go through an appropriations bill, which was gazetted and approved. The money should be coming to Mango at any time. The reason why there's a delay, we can't explain it, because our understanding and expectation was that that money should have been with Mango a long time ago. As early as of yesterday already. So why it hasn't flown, we're not too sure, but we are still engaging DPE. So the money should flow anytime from now.
But it's a little too late, especially for staff who haven't been paid for months. The unions also pleaded with the courts to place the airline into business rescue.
The problem is that Mango has been a subsidiary of SAA since it was founded in 2005. So we've never really had a chance to see how it's been doing financially. And now in the application or the court papers for this business rescue, now we see that it's been doing okay, but it hasn't had a chance or an opportunity to build up its own reserves on its own balance sheet, because it's been very much part of SAA. So that means that it hasn't been as resilient, as strong as, let's say, FlySAF areas or Airlink, or even perhaps Comair Kalula BA. It hasn't had the resources to carry it through the COVID lockdown and pandemic and the loss of passengers, etc., etc.
Senior Mango executives are currently negotiating with ATNS on a temporary payment to get the airline back in the air. Sumitra Nadev, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
And that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but still to come on Global Business. Nigeria is making plans to launch its own digital currency. More on that coming up top of the hour. For now, back to you, Lindy.
Thanks, Uche. Well, let's take a short break. Here's what's still ahead on Africa Live. Coming up, community libraries provide a welcome escape for youth in Nigeria's Plateau State.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
A community library is helping to provide safe educational spaces and foster a reading culture. Its success has prompted parents and educators to ask the government for more community libraries around the country. Our correspondent, Tsema Kende, reports.
Lindy Mtongana, co-founder of a community library in Junta, a locality in the north-central Nigerian city of Jos, is tucking up books for his library. He hopes this library will engage young people to read and learn and keep them away from social vices and criminal activity. But the odds were stacked up against him.
We received an overwhelming zero support. Everyone didn't believe it was possible because Junta had been known for several things that were not so good. Drug abuse, teenage pregnancy, cultism, and all of these things.
The United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, says Nigeria has more than 10 million out-of-school children, the highest of any country in the world. More than 69% of them are from the northern part of the country. But the library offers a safe learning avenue for youngsters like 12-year-old Zebulun Dodo. His father, Chinge Dodo, says the library has had a positive impact on his son.
Anytime I ask of my child, where is he? Highest I know is he's in the library. And I'm okay. Not that he's jumping on these mountains. So I think other communities too, they need such thing. And government should bring in enough resources to build a bigger library. For me, I would say in every constituency or every ward safe.
The community library is now getting support from Books to Africa, a non-governmental organization based in the city of Jos. The NGO receives book donations from the UK and supplies them to the community library. With their support, plans for more libraries are in the works. Experts say libraries in every community in the country will go a long way to keep young people away from social vices and reduce crime.
Reading will take away their time from going into all sorts of vices. When they are busy, they will think less of such things. Not just that. And you know, there are dropouts too. When they see a library where they can get books, they are eager to read.
The Nigerian government says it is taking education and the promoting of a reading culture among young people seriously by increasing its budgetary allocation for the sector. And with such a move, people like Lindy Mtongana can look forward to more community libraries for youth and adolescents across the country. Tsema Kende, CGTN Jos, Nigeria.
And coming up in your sports news, up next. It's joy for Egypt as the team reaches the round of 16 of the Olympics football competition.